Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by Yasu. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Nanapod. So we are picking up in chapter 67 here, and the narration says, "When a sudden gust blows, accidents can happen. I choose this path of turmoil myself. But please, just for now, let the tour go well without any problems." And then we are opening up in waiting room 1A. And it's Yasu, goes tap with his cigarette, and it says, "An apartment near Aoyama Cemetery. Shin's from that area, but..." And then Fomasato says, "I confirm the apartment name. He's living back at home." And then Yasu says, "But I can't imagine Shin going home to his dad's place. Maybe he's out partying somewhere." And Fomasato says, "Well, Genpai was worried about that too. We got staff to stake out the place all night." He says, "Yeah?" And she says, "But Shin never went out, and Shin's father's out of the country on business. So maybe he only goes home when his dad's not around." And Yasu's remembering the time when they had to basically sign that waiver so Shin could be in the band, and Shin's father said, "I could never make myself love Shinichi, not ever." And then he's like, "I didn't realize Shin was going out so much. The only time I see him is during band stuff. Honestly, I haven't had time to worry about Shin." And she says, "You've got too much on your plate, Yasu. You were all worried about Misuzu and Masato, too. I'm sorry for being dependent on you for so much." And he says, No. And she says, "As the band manager, I'm ordering you to let everyone take care of themselves and just concentrate on the tour starting tomorrow." And then he just takes a pause and then says, "All right, sorry." And then she smiles. And now we are in a different spot. And it might be their main manager man. He's like, "Good morning, sorry we're late." He's bringing in Shin, and Nana looks real pissed with all the dots. And then she grabs the handler. Oh, that's who it is. And she says, "You made him late." And she's got like teeth, like she's a vampire. And he says, "No, I went to pick him up at the right time." And she says, "You have to watch him better." And Yasu's just back there with the dots. And then Genpai says, "Shin, you don't have to push yourself if you're not feeling good. We can do rehearsal tomorrow." And he says, "I'm all right. I just overslept." And Yasu still has the dots and the sweat bead. And then the other manager's like, "Overslept?" And then Yasu's like, "Damn, the more I try not to worry, the more I worry." He definitely wants to say something. And he says, "I haven't trained myself." And then Nobu, oblivious, is like, "Train for what?" And then it kind of looks like this manager guy bopped Shin on the head because he's got a little band-aid on his head now. And then the manager's like, "All right, I'll chew you out later. Let's start rehearsing." And then there it is, and the band is playing. And now our nice little fox manager is just smiling away, watching them perform. And then it's kind of hard to see who's talking here in the dark. Oh, it's Genpai. And he says, "Hey, Kawano, you're here, heart." And Kawano says, "Nana's at the top of her game. She's hitting all the high notes perfectly." And Genpai says, but maybe she shouldn't sing full on right now and save her voice for the concert. Her voice is already kind of strained. And Koano says, well, it's the big day they've been waiting for. Let her sing her heart out. And Genpai says, we can't let her rest on her laurels, says Genpai. We need this tour to change their reputation from a manufactured one-hit wonder band. And they need to work even harder after this. Heart. And Kawano just smiles. And then after they're rehearsing, Masato says, that was awesome. Heart. And then Nana says, hey, can I stage dive while we're playing? And the manager says, no way. And then Nobu says, you can say no, but she'll probably do it anyways. And then Yasu says, the crowd'll eat you alive. And then Nana has these little blush lines, and she's like, but what a way to die. Stage dive to death. And then Nobu goes, yeah! And Yasu has the dots with the worried face. And then Genpai says, Nobu, you got a radio interview to do before you die. Chop chop. And Nobu says, no problem, Heart. And I'll jam our new song, too. And then Nana says, what's my schedule to Masato? Any interviews? And she says, I cleared your schedule because Ren's home waiting for you, Heart. And then Nana's just got like this, look. And now she's back at her apartment. And she's like, she's right. Ren's back from England. I mean, I didn't forget. Well, maybe for a second. Damn. And then she's got the dots and is like, I feel nervous. I'm nervous because I feel like I can't make any mistakes. I have to try to relax and enjoy myself. Then things will be all right on their own. It's just like playing a good show. Well, here goes nothing. And then Ren is like, hello, darling, Heart. And she's got the dots. And then is like, congratulations, Heart. Sorry for coming home late. I'll make dinner right away. And then she puts on an apron with a swish and all these flowers. And he's looking at her like, what? And then he's like, no, don't. You're tired and you're acting weird. You should see a doctor. And now she's got like this, with the dots, you know, just like, no, he's wrecking it. I have to keep going. And now she's like, I'm just really hungry and you better be too. She's got a knife and a tomato. And he's like, let's just get takeout. You're really tired. And he's looking at a menu that says sushi. And then she's like, no, I'm not tired at all. Actually, I feel really hyper. Yokohama Arena's totally massive. And then she just starts to sing along. And then she's like, so Ren, how'd recording go? So was the sound really better because it's less humid in England? That's what Hachi said. And he's like, what? Well, maybe in the summertime, but things aren't that different in the winter. It's actually probably more humid there now. And she's like, what the hell? So Takumi's just lying to Hachi? Is she all right? And then he just starts laughing. And then she's like, so then why bother going to England to record? To brag? And he's like, dunno. I guess 'cause you don't have to worry about people watching you, especially for Rira. And then she takes a pause and says, why does Takumi spoil Rira so much? And then he just looks at her like, is that what it seems like? That's so weird. And she's like, well, I don't think so. Well, I think so. I think there's something going on there. I feel bad for Hachi. And then Ren just has this look that's very pregnant because, like, he knows. He knows the real reason. And then he's like, well, I think if they'd gotten together a long time ago, things wouldn't be so complicated now. And then Nana says, what do you mean complicated? And then he's just taking a beat and he says, well, like with Hachiko, then she wouldn't have had to break up with Nobu. And then Nana says, what are you hiding from me? This sounds too weird. And she's like threatening him with the kitchen knife. She's like, you better not have hooked up with Rira. and he's got the dots. And then he says, Rira doesn't think of me like that. Never did. I don't know why. 'Cause I'm not baldy? And then, like, he has a little heartbreak. And she's laughing and it's like, that's what you deserve. And then he's like, so how's Shin doing? And then she's like angry face and she's like, not too good. He seems totally lost. No will to live, actually. She's kind of lying. I mean, yeah, he's having moments where he isn't doing super great, but like, he's not that bad. And then Ren's got dots and stress lines, and then she's like, Ren, you're coming to our show tomorrow, right? Give him a pep talk before the concert, will ya? And then Ren just kind of looks like, I don't know. And then there's a ring of a phone, and then there's someone that's saying, hey Shin. Oh, it's the handler again. Because Shin's looking at his phone going beep, and he says, please don't sleep in tomorrow. Actually, Jin told me to take you back to the dorms tonight. And he's got the dots. Because he's looking at a text message from Rira that says, I'm back. And this is February 1st. And the message says, I flew back to Japan today. No matter what you think of me, no matter who says what, I can't forget you, Shin. I don't want to pretend like nothing happened. I want to talk to you again, so please call me. I'm waiting for you to call me. And then the handler says, hey, did you hear me? And Shin says, shut up. And then the guy just is like, oh, okay, with all the dots and a room. And then he's like, I don't see why my going home should be such a big problem. And the handler says, but if you're late again, it's everyone's problem. And he says, I know. I promise I'll get up on time tomorrow. So just let me do what I want when I'm not working. And the handler looks really sad. And Shin's looking at his phone and it says, I'm waiting for you to call me. But then he says, all right, I'll come get you early in the morning. Is that cool? And then Shin says, but rehearsal's in the afternoon. And he says, so you can sneak in the dorm while everyone's still asleep. Please understand the position I'm in. And Shin looks sad and says, all right, I'm sorry. And then he slumps down. And the handler's got the dots. And then says, look, I know it's annoying. You just go back and forth between work and the dorms. You've got no time to go off on your own. It'd drive me crazy. And Shin says, but everyone else can pull it off. They're solid. I'm the screw-up. And the handler says, oh, really? Yasu and Nobu have both hooked up with girls in the dorms. They're having fun. Now, Shin's got, like, the dot eyes. And the handler's like, they're screwing around. And Shin just smiles. And then says, then maybe I should hook up with Masato, heart. She's right next door, heart. And he's like, what are you saying? Don't! The Prez will kill you! And then he takes a beat and says, what the hell? Why would he care? And the handler says, well, Mai, is a very competent staffer who the Prez really trusts. That's all I mean. And Shin's just got this look like, nah, I don't, okay, but I don't feel that's the whole story. And now we're switching back to Ren and Nana's. And there's a click of a remote control. And Ren says, hey, it's Sumika, heart. And then Ren's like, Sumika Morishita always comes to our concerts. She's my fan, heart. And the girl on the television is like, don't make me laugh. I just use you to get what I want. And Nano's like, oh, damn, I was watching this show every week. I forgot about it. And he says, really? You watch soaps? Do I know you? And she says, Hachi tapes it and makes me watch it. And then she's got a memory of Hachi being like, watch it with me, it's really good, heart. And she's like, huh? And she's like, then I got totally addicted. It's so cute. She got her addicted to soap operas. Perfect. No notes. Um, and then Ren starts laughing, and then in the background it's like, to be continued. And she's like, it's cool though. I'm sure she's got it all on tape. And he says, watch it and study up. You're going to act in one, right? Heart. And then she's like, no way. And he's like, I thought they were making you do it. And she's like, Genpai tried. But the Prez turned it down and said I don't have to if I hate it that much. He looks scary, but he's a good guy. Heart. And then Ren says, well, that's too bad. I wanted to see you on TV. I think it'd be hilarious. She looks at him like, the fuck? And then he's like, this tamagoyaki's good. It's an omelet roll. And then she says, I know, right? Hachi taught me. And he's like, wow. That's why it's so fluffy. Just like Hachiko, heart. He's thinking of her as a little dog, as a little, like, tamagoyaki roll. And then she's like, yeah, that's the way she rolls. And he smiles. And then she has all these dots with blush lines. And she's thinking, things are going well. And there was a crank because she's getting ready to take a bath. And she's like, we're making good conversation. And Ren seems to be having a good time. And then he's reading his Jump magazines and laughing. And then she's like, what's so funny? Royo? And then she's like, if things stay like this, we could live together forever. I'm hanging out with Hachi again. The band's doing well. Everything's all right. And then there's a stomp of a rocking horseshoe as we're back with Shin. And the automatic doors slide open. And it says, no problems. And then there's a desk clerk that says, good evening. And he goes stomp, stomp, stomp. And he takes his key and it goes click. And there's another slide of the doors and it goes stomp, stomp. And then there is a boy. And he sees Shin and he says, Shinichi? And he stops. And then he turns around. And this boy says, long time no see. What's a celebrity like you doing here? But Shin looks kind of just really upset. And then there's a step as this boy comes around and says, hello, I'm talking to you. It's about time you learn to speak Japanese. And Shin has like this, almost like an intake of breath with the dots. And this guy's waiting and he says, I came to pick up my stuff. And this kid says, your room's gone, dude. And Shin looks at him like this, what? And he said Dad turned it into his library. And, you know, it's sort of hard to say what the relationship like is between these two. Because obviously, like, his half-brother is acknowledging him. But he's semi-smug at the same time. So I'm assuming that the relationship might have been slightly abusive when they were growing up. And then because Shin's possessions and everything have just been, I don't know, dumped, we never really found out what or why, he just has this fully blank stare, like completely disassociating, very, very hollow, clearly upset. And the think boxes say, that night I was wrapped in Ren's arms for the first time in a month. As I came again and again, I wondered which would be better, dying in Ren's arms or dying on stage. And then we have kind of a shot here of Rira taking out her pinky ring and putting it back on her finger. And the think boxes say, but why does it matter? If I can live happily with Ren and sing as much as I want, I won't regret a thing, even if I die alone in the gutter. What's important is how you live your life. And then now we're here at Hachi and Takumi's, and she says, "Hey Takumi, heart, Blast's concert is tonight, so I'm going out." And he says, "Are you still mad at me?" And she says, "No, not at all, heart." But she sets down an omelet roll, and she's taken the ketchup, and she's made an angry face on on the omelet roll, and I love it. And he's got the dots like, oh my god, she's still mad. And then she's like, "Right, Sachi?" And then just heart and goes away. And then there's a ring of a phone, and she picks it up. And she's like, "Hi, Yasu! Good morning, heart!" And all these flowers. And then she's like, "Are you psyched for the start to tour?" And he says, "Nana, is Shin over there?" And she has these blank eyes like, "What? Huh?" And now she's like, "What?" And then there's a ring of a phone in Rira's room. And she thinks that it's Shin calling. So, of course, she's like immediately up. And it says Takumi. And she's just kind of like, what the fuck? Because, he doesn't call people. It's not his thing. And then she picks up and she's like, "Hello?" And he says, "Rira, is Shin with you?" And she has like this, And then he's like, "You don't have to lie. I know everything. If you're back with him, tell me the truth." And she's like, "How do you know?" And he says, "So he's there?" And she says, "No, he's not. Who told you? And what do you know?" And he says, "I can tell just by watching you. You thought I didn't notice?" And then Hachi kind of has this look like, okay, interesting. He watches Rira's every move. And then she's blushing, and he says, "If he's there, put him on the phone." And she says, "He's not here. There's no way he'd come over." And Takumi looks kind of like a little sad for her. And then he's like, "All right then, fine." And then there's a click as he hangs up. And it's February 2nd, a Saturday at 8:27. And then there's a ding dong. And she gets up and she looks into the peephole, and there's a ding dong, and then a whoosh, and Ren's on the other side of the door. And she's like, "Ren, what's wrong?" And he's like, "Shin's really not here?" And then she's like, "Why? What's wrong with Shin?" And then the handler is like, "I am so sorry." And Genpai looks really annoyed. And he's like, "Don't apologize, it's too late." "And what do you mean he's not anywhere? Did you really look for him?" And Nana says, "Genpai, where's Shin? Did you find him?" And then Ren, back with Rira, says, according to his assistant, he didn't come down to the lobby and he wouldn't answer his cell phone. So he rang the doorbell. Then a guy who's apparently Shin's older brother answered. He saw Shin in the hallway yesterday, but Shin didn't go in the apartment. Actually, he never stayed there at all. And Rira's eyes are big and vacant and worried. And he says, "Do you know anywhere else Shin might be?" And she's like, "Yes." And he's like, "Really?" And she's just like, "There's this apartment." And he's like, "Well, whose apartment?" And she's thinking about the time that Shin was really, really pissed and had told her, "I only did what I was trained to do by a woman who's a perv and into pretty boys. There's a lot more where I came from." And she's just like, drinking and smoking, that woman taught him the evil ways of the world. Just really, really heartbreaking, because it's like, this is his madam. We're talking about his madam, this woman that groomed him. So, now we are with Yuri, and she's just like, "I don't see why you're making this into such a big deal. He'll come back eventually." And Nobu's like, "Eventually isn't good enough. We have to find him quick or else we'll miss our rehearsal." And Nana says, "We've got a big concert tonight." And Genpai's like, Shin isn't so irresponsible he'd skip out on this. He's not like you. And she's got all the dots. And truthfully, I think that, like, she's not necessarily being super insensitive. She's also a victim of SA, but she deals with it differently. Well, not SA, but like grooming. And I think hers is just kind of like a, well, that's just the way of the world, guys, which it's not, but you know. Then Genpai says, he hasn't been eating right lately. Maybe he passed out and got sent to the ER? What do what do we do? And Miyu says they'd call the agency. Yasu says, yeah, he must have overslept at a friend's place. And Nana says, a friend? You know it's some chick. And Yasu has like the dots and is like, Then Genpai's like, but what if he got into an accident somewhere? Poor baby Shin. And Miyu says, again, they'd call the agency. She's so practical. And then Yasu's doing so good at, just trying to keep his mouth shut here. And he's got all the dots. And then there's a ring. And Genpai's like, the phone. And he looks at his phone and it says, Shikai. And he's like, it's the agency. He got in an accident. Honestly, same. I would be just as freaking out as Genpai. And Nana snatches the phone from him and says, stop acting like an idiot. Answer the phone quick. And then she answers it with a hello. And now Genpai is holding Yasu's head. And he goes, oh, Yasu. And he's just kind of got like dots. Like, what the? Okay. And then here's Greasy Dude. And he's like, Nana, I've got bad news. And she's like, what is it? And it's him and one of the other handlers and Fomasato. And he says Shin got arrested. And now Nana looks really concerned. And the think boxes say, hey Hachi, are you living every day like it's your last, with no regrets? I mean, girl, she's living every day looking for you. But that's the end of the chapter. Oh yeah, that one's a tough one. 'Cause yeah. It's not his fault, obviously. Because he was groomed by this person, but he got impulsive because he's very hurt. And it isn't something that Shin does extremely often, but like, he's allowed to have these feelings. But it also is showing how messed up it is, because when he made a choice, he went to the one person who is not necessarily good to go back to, but she'll take him in every time. He has quote-unquote stability there. And that's it's bad. It's really bad. So, anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Good night.